Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. The Afternoon Update with Lynlee Foo.
Good afternoon, you're with Lynlee on the Afternoon Update. Now, Singapore turns 60 this year, and we have so much to be proud of. Singapore is well-ranked, well-connected, and known globally for efficiency and safety. But as Prime Minister Lawrence Wong recently reflected on a national speech he worked on, the goal isn't just to be a successful country, it's to be a global city called home. That raises important questions, because what makes a place home? And who truly gets to experience that sense of belonging, to feel part of Singapore's story? Is it about your passport, the food you crave when you're away, or something deeper, the feeling that your story is welcomed here, not just allowed? Today on Viewpoint, we explore what belonging means at SG60 with three guests who see it from very different vantage points. Dr. Mathew Mathews, who is a sociologist from the Institute of Policy Study. He has researched how identity and integration evolve. Jake Low is a filmmaker and visual artist whose work explores memory, place, and national narrative. And Amandine Honvault is a longtime resident and creator of Add New to Singapore, a platform that helps newcomers feel at home, even as she's still navigating her own status here. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mathew, let's start with you. You've spent years researching how people in Singapore view identity, immigration, and belonging. What would you say is the state of national cohesion at this 60-year mark?
In terms of cohesion, I think we have done well as a nation, whether you are newer to Singapore, whether you've been here for a long time. I think there's a sense that we are together in this society, at least from the broad levels. You don't see the kind of conflict that you see in some different places, and people do know that within this society, we want to keep levels of harmony high. And so I think there's a shared commitment to make that happen. Though, of course, that does not mean that different groups in our society may not feel as welcome. I think there's a lot of discussion for a long time about how migrant workers, for instance, might be seen as, very transient and therefore really not part of our local space, and they're not seen as integratable here. And then, of course, there are people who might be coming in here newer, who feel that we are not the kind of inclusive space that they would want to see. And of course, there are those who have been here for a long time who feel that, with all the changes that have happened and new people here, we don't have the same kind of cohesion that perhaps we had at some point of time before.
That's true. We have matured, but expectations of inclusivity are also rising. So we often talk about how far we've come, but maybe not enough about how our definitions of us are changing. Are you seeing any generational shifts in how people define what it means to belong here?
I think we must remember that the earlier Singaporeans who grew up here, in the earlier years since independence, and when Singapore moved from third world to first world city, a lot of identity was based on Singapore's success narrative. It's about being a society which is successful, we have done well, efficiency, been able to give people a higher standard of living, got us out of poverty, for instance, got past many of the big tensions which were there at that point of time. So it's a lot about survival, doing well, and that's been very much part of the identity. Today, we talk about our younger people who are coming in. It's a different notion. That's past. We don't really think so much about survival, but what Singapore can provide is a space to be able to realize some of their dreams, what they would like to have, going forward. So there will be different kind of expectations that people have.
Okay, one more question here. Is Singapore's ambition to be a global city compatible with its desire to stay tightly cohesive?
Being a global city and being a connected society is not really completely on extreme poles. You can find, hopefully Singapore will be able to bring that bridge. But it is true. In many places when you have a global city, the reality of a global city is that because of the fast-paced nature, because the global city needs to be open to influences from everywhere, capital, talent, you have to keep that moving through a global city. And when that happens, people don't feel the sense of connections. Connections tend to be very transient. Spaces tend to change all the time to accommodate all these different movements, whether it's a capital, whether it's new industries. So every change is the constant in global cities. And then if you want to have that sense of belonging and everything being normal, then you don't want that change to be so fast. You want things to be slower. You want people to be the same throughout. So there seems to be that odd, and I think that people normally see global cities as being a little bit more hostile. But I think Singapore has that unique opportunity to make this place, though a global city, but also, as we know, as also a country, a nation, to be able to work towards seeing cohesion and seeing people from different parts of Singapore, different stratas, different backgrounds, different immigration backgrounds, to be able to feel that this is really home.
Yes, indeed. I think that balance there is the challenge. How can we stay open without feeling like we're losing something, right? Amandine, let's bring you in here. You've been in Singapore for 6 years now and counting. Did you ever imagine you'd ever stay for so long?
I wouldn't even imagine I would come to Singapore and settle here. When I first arrived in Singapore, it was just for internship, 6 months, and then I was going back home. But I would say really early during my first internship, I discovered how amazing of a place Singapore is to live. Even as a student who is like the what I had back then as a student, I could see myself living here. So really early on, I decided, okay, I will try to come back to Singapore and just settle here. So I would say like maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't see myself living overseas. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't know even Singapore was on the map. But now, yeah, I think I want to stay here. So I just hope this happens.
May I just ask where you were born? Which part of France?
I'm from France. So I think in terms of culture is very different from Singapore. Mm-hmm. Where in France we value more like individualism. Mm-hmm. Where in Singapore I really like this community feeling that I experienced.
Okay, so you slowly fell in love with this place.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a story we hear more and more of. People arriving with no long-term plan and then something clicks. But your story also involves a lot of waiting. I think you've applied for formal status to be a resident here a few times, and it was not the outcome that you wanted.
So I first applied to stay in Singapore in 2023. I didn't want my stay in Singapore to be tied to my work, but I got rejected the first time. So I was like, okay, maybe it's because I didn't stay enough in Singapore, so I'm going to try in 2 more years. So then I tried a second time, but then I got rejected again. So I was like, okay, now it's been a few years since I'm in Singapore. Maybe there's just like something about me. My culture is too different, so it cannot be accepted in Singapore. I need to like show more effort and commitment towards Singapore. So it really comes with like staying longer, doing more actions, to be part of the society here, strengthen my career, all these kind of things. So it's not immediate, but I still have hope that I will be part of Singapore as a PR. Yeah.
Okay. After a few times of rejection, yet you're still here. I can see that it's an emotional experience for you, looking at you right now. So contributing, building community through your platform, New to Singapore. What keeps you going?
I think it's just every day I'm building a life that I really like for myself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what keeps me going is like this sense of home. Now that I feel home in Singapore, I don't want to leave it. Mm-hmm. Like going back to France, I wouldn't see that for myself at all. So I think that's really what keeps me going. The effort that I make every day to settle here, to build a routine, have friends. Even like my family, they are starting to experience Singapore in different ways. So it's really all this. Now Singapore is part of my life, a part of me. So I think it's just like this hope for the future that I see.
Okay. To be more blunt, what do you love about Singapore?
I mean, there are a lot of things I love about Singapore. The first thing I really enjoy is the weather. I know it's like...
Weather, okay.
Yeah. I know it's not the case for like
summer for
all
you.
locals. Like even expats, sometimes they find it too hot or maybe it's too rainy. But for me, it's just right, where I get the heat. I don't need to have a different wardrobe, whether it's winter, whether it's summer. And also from the north of France. So we have like 3 months where during winter time where it gets very dark early. So you barely see the sun. So it's not something I experience in Singapore. I really enjoy that.
It's all the same all year round.
Exactly. I like this stability.
Okay.
But beyond that is also the fact that the life in Singapore is very comfortable because you have like all your grocery shopping very in a near distance of your home. Your workplace also won't be too far. You don't need to drive. So it's like all those little things, even like luxury of life that I wouldn't see myself having in France. Like I can go for a massage when I'm feeling very tired. These kind of things I wouldn't have in France. So I really enjoy this side of life in Singapore.
Right. So it's safe, convenient, and many things are accessible to you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, that sense of choosing to stay, I think, even without formal recognition, I think it really deepens the idea of home, doesn't it? Okay, Mathew, do you hear many stories like this, like Amandine's, where people feel deeply rooted but not officially accepted?
And that's a fact. I mean, you'll find many people who have, in many ways, fallen in love with Singapore in different aspects of it. But I guess what happens when it comes to immigration policy and whether somebody is formally accepted as a citizen or a permanent resident, I think that there are probably very low. But if you look at, how policies have been done, there's always an attempt to try to keep that careful balance between, of course, different groups, and also having the sense that Singapore and people who become part of Singapore have the ethos, the values to be able to contribute to a society like this. And of course, we don't have a very, very clear set of metrics of exactly how people become citizens, who is accepted as a permanent resident, who becomes a citizen. Some of those things are opaque, which happens, I think, in many places around the world. Some of those decisions will be there, and they always will leave people wondering, do I have to do something more to become accepted within Singapore? But having said that, I do feel that hopefully Singapore will be able to provide that space for people, even if they don't have that formal recognition as a permanent resident or a citizen, to still be able to still feel that they can be part of broader society here in Singapore. And of course, at this point of time, much of that is tied to work and being employable in Singapore, and that seems to be how it's been arranged.
Yeah, I think that gap there can be quite difficult to live in, but it also tells us something about what home really means. Jake, bringing you into the conversation finally. Thanks for patiently waiting. Now, your work as a filmmaker and artist touches on memory, space, and identity. How do you think storytelling shapes our sense of place?
I think storytelling allows for people to express ideas, that their own personal thoughts, in a way that's not so abrasive. And I think that generally allows for the message to be shared across different cultures and across people of different backgrounds. Because, like, let's say if I were to issue a statement of my own opinion, right, that in itself would just be limited to a certain target group. But then with storytelling and film in particular, you can share that, and it sort of crosses different boundaries, and people of all backgrounds can understand that message that you're trying to spread. So that's that. And about storytelling affecting the idea of place, I think it really is how you portray something in the medium. And for example, like, I like to chase things that aren't commonly seen in the mainstream aspect of Singapore's media. So in Singapore's media, you tend to see like the typical stories where someone goes through some hardship and then there's a straightforward path to success after with hard work and stuff. But with the films that I do, I want to showcase things that are a bit weirder, but still very real, because a lot of these are based on my own personal experiences that you don't tend to see, and they are not often told in our media landscape.
For example?
You'll have to watch my film. It's a bit too personal to share on air. But that affects how people see things.
Okay. Do you think there's enough space in our national narrative for complexity, for people who might not, fit in the usual boxes and labels?
I think we're getting there. I think on the ground you can see a lot of, from my experience, I see a lot of youngsters and youth filmmakers trying to push the boundaries of our society, and it's almost like an elastic band. You can't push it too much, if not it'll snap. But you push it, and then the people that sort of take a while to catch up, y'all will form an equilibrium, and then hopefully you guys move forward an inch. And then I think that's the responsibility of the younger generation, to sort of continue to push this boundary, to hopefully progress further and further into something that we are all proud of at the end of the day, something that we can achieve a more inclusive landscape.
Okay. Yeah. So I suppose you do see yourself reflected in that complexity.
Yes.
Now, Mathew, do creative expressions like Jake's help move the needle on public attitudes?
I do think that it is the case, and we do need to build a certain acceptance of complexity and diversity within Singapore's fabric. I mean, the early days of Singapore, that was not possible because it is a mayhem to be able to deal with so much complexity, and I don't think our society was ready at that point of time. But we have matured as a society over the years, and increasing our ability to deal with the complexities. The complexities and the marginal will never be mainstream necessarily. It may not define what our society is, but certainly the recognition that you have things which might be very different. So creative compositions which are very not mainstream and what people normally will look at. But the fact that we recognize that even for that, there is a place for it. Of course, as long as it fits within the broader ambits of not threatening any kind of harmony within society, right? But if not, then really allowing that allows people to know that, hey, within this space, we do allow. And sometimes it's about tolerance because I may not like Jake's creative compositions, and I think it might be a little crazy. But the idea that, hey, I mean, Jake does have legitimate right to express some of his views and some of his creative expressions should be allowed within that broader space. And so we might be able to, I think that's important for our society as one which wants to be open to diversity and be inclusive. We have to allow that space.
Yeah, certainly. I think stories make space for empathy, but policy also needs that human layer. Let's open this up to each of you. What makes a place feel like home? Who wants to go first?
I mean, because Singapore is the furthest of like what I would have imagined home to be, but at the end of the day, I think home is not really about the place so much. It's more about the routines that you're able to build, the friends that you are able to have. So whether this is in Singapore or I could have built it in France as well, I think that's really what you have to try to find, something that suits you, something you feel happy at the end of the day, or you can go to bed and just feel relaxed, feel contentment. So I think that's what I find in Singapore that I like, and that's my definition of home.
Jake?
For me, it would be the people around me and the support system. And also it's just a combination of different things. We've got the very polished side of Singapore, and we've also got the underbelly of Singapore, and I like to view them as one together. Yeah.
And Mathew?
I think home for many is about security and safety, and what will provide the sense of stability in a world which sometimes seems to be chaotic, sometimes hard to understand. But when you come to home, you want something that sometimes when people say the haven, the heartless world, the space that allows people to feel welcomed, and there's some kind of sense that everything is secure within that space, within what would otherwise be very, very tumultuous.
Yes, I think that really resonates. For me, home is where I don't feel like I have to explain myself all the time, where the people and the place, just get you, right? So like what you've all said, I think it's also about recognition. And this theme of recognition, as I mentioned earlier, has also been visible recently when several migrant construction workers rescued a woman from a sinkhole, right, at Tanjung Katong Road. President Taman invited them to the Istana recently. Public agencies like PUB acknowledged their bravery officially, and the Ministry of Manpower presented them with some appreciation coins. Their heroism really sparked public admiration, as well as a $72,000 donation campaign, if I'm not wrong. It's a small but meaningful example of how someone can be formally acknowledged and emotionally accepted, embraced as an active part of this place. So do you think Singapore today is still a place people genuinely want to stay long-term? Or do we risk being a stopover city? Mathew?
And people will have various motivations for this. I think a lot of people would want to be here in the city. I think Singapore provides lots of things which are attractive and people want to. But of course, there will be deterring factors. Singapore is obviously not the cheapest place to live in. So I would say if most people would choose not to be in Singapore, it's probably because of some of the other issues, concerns about whether they can cope with the cost, for instance, and maybe somewhere else might be a lot more easy to adapt to, or to live with lower costs. So those might be considerations. But if not, then I think Singapore is a choice place for many.
Okay.
I've always felt that Singapore was my home base, and I don't think it'll ever change because it provides that stability for me, and I've got my support system around. And I feel like we're headed towards a kinder direction under Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. It seems like we're starting to focus more on like the more holistic side of Singaporeans, like, you know, being kind, being inclusive, building your community. Of course, this was always there in the previous times, but it feels like that focus has been highlighted more in recent months. Yeah, and I think we're headed towards that right direction.
Okay. Amandine?
So for me, I want to stay in Singapore, so I would say yes. There are still people who are willing to go through the challenges of living in Singapore, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's the immigration policies. So there are still people. I think what's important is not to see Singapore as just a place that's trendy, but really think long term, or okay, can you actually live here? I mean, see Singapore for what it is, so that you are not living in that dream Singapore, but you are able to see the holistic side of Singapore, whether it's like the creative side that could be open a bit more.
Yeah, I suppose belonging really is about lived experiences. It's a feeling, right? And feelings are shaped by stories, signals, and small acts of acceptance, I suppose. That's something we can all contribute to. Fast forward 60 more years. What do you hope home will mean in Singapore at SG 120?
Personally, I would be soon 100 years old. So, I hope that, for me, because I have a local boyfriend, right? I hope that we will have kids. Our kids will come from this mixed background of like French and Singapore. Hopefully they grow up in the safety of Singapore. And I really hope that there is a place for them where they can find other people who are also coming from a mixed background and they will feel accepted.
Okay. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
I hope that Singapore, at SG 120 is a place where communities and people from different cultures truly celebrate each other, and not just on racial harmony day or some special occasion, but truly celebrate each other in their everyday life. And because of that, hopefully that Singaporean identity becomes more apparent, rather than saying I'm Chinese, you're Indian, you're Malay, that you can just say that we're all Singaporean. Where it starts to blend across. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 120, one really wish Singapore would continue to become extremely successful in everything, right? On the cutting edge of many things, which I think is what gives a vibrancy for our city-state, but also one place where we don't have to deal with the same issues that we have to deal with now: racism, sexism, xenophobia, ageism, all the prejudice issues that we are concerned about. In 60 years, hope that my colleagues who follow me doing research in this area won't have much to do.
That's the Singapore I want to live into if I become immortal, I suppose. Now, to close in just one sentence, what would make Singapore feel even more like home over the next 10 years?
I think giving recognition to our migrant workers, not so much in terms of citizenship or permanent abode, which is really not possible in our very small city-state, but make sure that each one of them feels that in this place they are recognized, that they are acknowledged, that what they do here is valued by Singaporeans. I think that's an important aspect for all those who are working here to provide and help build this city.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Dr. Mathews said is really about recognizing the people in the outlines to really give them a sense of hey, I see you, and it's not like I'm giving you more rights than the others, It's just that I want to recognize you as an equal, and I think that is something that would make it feel more like home to me.
Amandine?
I think my answer would be kind of like Singaporean. I hope I'm PR and we can be chill with my boyfriend because we are currently renting. So the place, the definition, the physical place of home currently is not really ours. So being able to get a place for ourselves in Singapore would be, I think, in the next 10 years, one of our dreams. Yeah.
Okay. And if I may, for me, it would be like what Jake said earlier, when people who've stayed, built and grown with this place are no longer seen as guests, but as family. And moments like recognizing those construction workers, I think those moments are so heartwarming. It reminds us that home is about more than walls and documents. It's about gratitude, visibility, and I think importantly, grace. My thanks to Dr. Mathew Mathews, Jake Low, and Amandine Honvault for joining this thoughtful conversation. As Singapore turns 60, maybe the next phase of our journey isn't just about achievements, but about acceptance. and about how we see each other and how we make space not just for living but for belonging. You've been listening to Viewpoint on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.